This Karen literally chained my driveway shut and told me I was trespassing on my own family land. Worst decision of her life. I'd been gone 3 years and came home to find steel chains and a private community sign blocking the mountain road my great-grandfather built in 1923. But here's what blew my mind. While I was away, 8 multi-million-dollar mansions had sprouted like ugly weeds in my pristine valley. The crunch of gravel under my boots should have felt like home. Instead, that crisp pine scent I dreamed about got choked by some woman's overpowering designer perfume as she climbed out of her white Range Rover like she owned the mountain. Blonde bob, clipboard weapon, attitude sharper than broken glass. Well, well, the hermit returns. This is private property now and you're trespassing. I kept my voice dead calm. Ma'am, that's my cabin up there. My family's owned this land since 1923. Her smile could have frozen lava. Not anymore, it isn't. Here's what this HOA queen didn't know. I didn't just own that century-old cabin. I owned the mineral rights under every single one of her precious mansions. What would you do if some HOA psycho locked you out of your own property? Drop where you're watching from in the comments. I know some of you have HOA war stories. My name's Declan Forrester Deck to anyone who's not trying to serve me legal papers. I'm 48, spent most of my adult life working oil rigs from Texas to North Dakota. The kind of work that leaves your hands permanently stained black and your back screaming by 40. But it paid the bills when life decided to kick me in the teeth. My great-grandfather homesteaded this valley in 1923. 320 acres of pristine Colorado wilderness, anchored by a hand-built log cabin tough enough to survive nearly a century of mountain storms. That cabin wasn't just shelter, it was legacy. The place where 3 generations of foresters learned that nobody owes you anything, and self-reliance isn't just a motto, it's survival. Then my mom got Alzheimer's. Suddenly I was sending every paycheck to the best memory care facility in Denver, working North Dakota's fracking fields while she slowly forgot my name. The taste of petroleum still haunts my morning coffee, a constant reminder of what I sacrificed to give her dignity in those final years. The cabin sat empty, collecting dust and memories, while I collected paychecks in the frozen wasteland. She passed 6 months ago. Peaceful, finally free. With funeral arrangements settled and my conscience clear, I was ready to come home and remember how to be human again. Should have known it wouldn't be that simple. The valley that greeted me looked like a luxury magazine threw up on my childhood. Where wildflower meadows used to bloom, perfect green lawns stretched like artificial carpets. The chemical bite of fertilizer had murdered the sweet mountain wildflower scent. 8 glass and steel monstrosities dominated the landscape, each one worth more money than my family had seen in 3 generations. And ruling over this environmental crime scene like some discount Disney villain was Vivian Ashworth. Picture your worst HOA nightmare. Give her a Dallas real estate license and enough money to buy a small country. 54 years old, blonde bob sharp enough to cut glass, and the kind of smile that says she's calculating your net worth while pretending to care about your day. Word around town was she'd swooped in 2 years ago through some shell company, bought up land faster than a poker player with marked cards, then immediately crowned herself Queen of Pine Ridge Estates. After our roadside meet-cute, Queen Viv handed me a manila envelope thicker than a phone book. 47 separate violation notices for the cabin that predated her great-grandparents by about 50 years. Get this. Non-compliant roof color. Apparently my great-grandfather's natural cedar shingles, weathered to a beautiful silver gray by decades of mountain weather, didn't match their architectural palette. Unauthorized outbuildings. That would be the 1920s root cellar that kept my family from starving during the Great Depression. Landscaping violations, because apparently God's own wildflowers aren't on their approved plant list. The grand total, $73,500, plus $500 per day until I achieved compliance. But here's what really crawled under my skin. It wasn't just highway robbery disguised as community standards, it was the way she said certain types with that particular tone that makes your jaw clench, the way her nose wrinkled when mountain wind carried the honest scent of work clothes. The subtle digs about transient lifestyles and questionable associations. This woman had never worked a day of real labor in her manicured life, but somehow I was the neighborhood cancer threatening her precious property values. The paperwork gave me 30 days. Pay up or face property lien and foreclosure. 30 days to comply with rules I'd never agreed to, from an organization I'd never joined over land my family had owned since before her parents were born. That evening, I drove my rust bucket F-250 to the county courthouse, diesel engine coughing like an old smoker. Jolene Carpenter was locking up. She'd been clerk there since Carter was president. "Deck Forrester," she said, her smile mixing warmth with sympathy. "Welcome home, honey. I'm real sorry about your mother." After thanking her, I asked about the HOA filings. Jolene's expression shifted from friendly to funeral director serious. A lot of politics around that development. Things got rushed through faster than a greased pig at county fair. The HOA covenant documents, filed just 18 months earlier, read like a dictator's wet dream. Page after page of legal jargon giving Vivian Ashworth power over everything from mailbox colors to how often you could have guests. But here's where it got interesting. My signature was nowhere on those documents. Not on any of them. Knowledge nugget. In Colorado, HOA covenants require unanimous consent from all affected property owners to be legally binding. Takeaway. Just because your neighbors signed doesn't mean you're automatically bound. Always verify your property is actually included in the legal documents. Driving home under stars clearer than my legal situation, one question burned in my brain. How does a brand new HOA claim authority over a century-old homestead they can't legally touch? What I didn't know yet was that my family had left me something way more valuable than just that old cabin. A week later, I'm enjoying my morning coffee on the cabin porch, real coffee, not the motor oil they served at North Dakota truck stops, when the peaceful mountain silence gets shattered by the crunch of expensive tires on gravel. 3 vehicles roll up my driveway like some kind of suburban invasion force. Viv's white Range Rover leads the parade, followed by 2 BMW SUVs packed with people who look like they got lost on their way to a country club. The smell of their collective cologne reaches me before they even get out. Apparently mountain air isn't fresh enough without adding designer fragrances. Viv emerges wearing what can only be described as a safari costume from REI's most expensive rack. Designer hiking boots so pristine they've clearly never touched actual dirt. Behind her come 3 other middle-aged specimens in matching outfits, clutching clipboards and cameras like they're documenting a war zone. "Morning, Mr. Forrester," she calls out with the kind of fake sweetness that makes your teeth hurt. "We're here for your mandatory architectural compliance inspection." I stay planted in my chair, savoring coffee that tastes like freedom. That's so? Don't recall sending out invitations. The HOA Architectural Review Committee has full authority to inspect all properties for covenant compliance, she announces, waving papers like a magic wand. Section 4.7 of the community bylaws. Her little committee starts clicking away with their cameras. My cabin, my truck, my woodpile, probably my morning stubble if they could zoom in close enough. The rapid-fire sound of shutters mixing with their whispered commentary about structural deficiencies and aesthetic disasters. "Ma'am," I say, standing up nice and slow, "this is private property. You weren't invited, and you sure as hell don't have permission to turn my home into your personal photo shoot." Viv's smile turns shark-like. "Actually, we do. Section 4.7 clearly states that the Architectural Committee..." "Section 4.7 of covenants I never signed," I cut her off. "Documents that don't apply to property that was never legally included. Now I'm asking you politely once to get off my land." Her face goes from pale to lobster red in about 3 seconds. She herds her committee back toward their vehicles like a frustrated camp counselor, but not before rolling down her window for one parting shot. "You'll regret this attitude, Mr. Forrester. We have ways of dealing with troublemakers who don't respect community standards." The next morning, my mailbox looks like a paper bomb went off. 14 separate violation notices, each one stamped with official HOA letterhead and signed in Viv's aggressive handwriting that looks like angry chicken scratches. Unpermitted structures. My great-grandfather's 1920s outhouse, now a charming historical feature, apparently violates modern setback requirements. Improper vehicle storage. My F-250 parked in my own driveway doesn't meet their precious aesthetic standards. Landscaping non-compliance. Wildflowers that have been blooming here since the Cretaceous period aren't on their approved plant list. But my personal favorite? Unauthorized outdoor equipment storage. These people are fining me for a splitting maul and a stack of firewood. Tools that kept my family warm for generations are now apparently eyesores threatening their property values. Each violation carries a $500 fine with daily penalties until corrected. The paper cuts on my fingers feel like tiny revenge as I sort through their bureaucratic blitzkrieg. That's when I notice something that makes me smile for the first time all week. Mini twist. The metadata on their violation photos shows timestamps from 3 days before their supposed inspection visit. These clowns had been trespassing on my property all week, photographing my home from multiple angles, planning their paper assault like some kind of suburban military operation. Time for my counterpunch. Radio Shack still exists in small mountain towns, bless their obsolete hearts. I spent the afternoon there picking up a trail camera system 6 units with night vision, motion detection, and audio recording. Colorado's a one-party consent state, and this is my property, so every word they speak here belongs to me. Within 48 hours, I struck gold. The cameras caught Viv and 2 committee members creeping around my property at dawn like discount ninjas, taking more photos and holding what looked like war council meetings right there on my land. The audio quality was restaurant clear. We need documentation of every possible violation. Viv's voice comes through perfectly. The more we can stack up, the faster we can pressure him into selling. What about environmental violations? One committee member asks. Could we claim his septic system is contaminating groundwater? Brilliant, Viv purrs. I'll call County Health tomorrow. Emergency contamination concerns always get immediate response. Knowledge nugget. Photographing private property from public areas is usually legal, but trespassing to gather evidence is criminal behavior that can void any legal proceedings based on that evidence. Takeaway. Trail cameras are worth their weight in gold when fighting HOA harassment. Bullies depend on operating in shadows, so drag them into the light. Armed with video evidence of their conspiracy, I had options. Call the sheriff, file harassment charges, lawyer up, and go nuclear. Instead, I decided to let them keep digging their own grave. 25 years on oil rigs teaches you patience. When you're working with equipment that'll kill you if you rush, you learn to think 3 moves ahead. Viv was operating on pure emotion and suburban entitlement. I was playing chess while she was still learning checkers. Right on schedule, my phone rings the next morning. Deck, it's Earl Dawkins from County Health. Got a complaint about septic violations at your place. Now, I know your grandfather built everything to last, but regulations require me to investigate. Earl, come on up anytime. Bring your full testing kit. I want everything documented official-like. 3 hours later, Earl's shaking his head like he can't believe what he's seeing. Son, your septic system is cleaner than most brand new installations. Whoever filed this complaint was either completely ignorant or flat-out lying. I hand him a USB drive loaded with selected highlights from my trail camera collection. Earl, I think you'll find this makes for fascinating viewing, especially the part where they discuss filing false environmental complaints. As his county truck disappears down the mountain trail, I pour myself another cup of that good coffee and watch storm clouds building over the valley. The air smells like rain and incoming justice. Viv thought she was playing hardball. She had no idea the game had just changed completely. 2 days after Earl's visit, I'm splitting firewood behind the cabin when I hear vehicles coming up the mountain again. Not the purr of luxury SUVs this time, the aggressive rumble of county trucks mixed with the whine of what sounds like a news van. 3 official vehicles park in my driveway: County Health Department, building inspector, and some guy with a clipboard who introduces himself as a state environmental compliance officer. Behind them, a local news crew is setting up cameras like they're expecting a disaster movie. Earl Dawkins climbs out of the health department truck looking embarrassed as hell. Deck, I'm real sorry about this. Got 3 more complaints yesterday, anonymous tips about immediate public health hazards and environmental contamination. State says I have to follow up with a full hazmat team. The building inspector, a thin guy named Peterson who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else, starts taking photos of my cabin's foundation. Someone reported structural instabilities and code violations that could affect neighboring properties. Meanwhile, the environmental officer badge says his name is Rodriguez suiting up in protective gear like he's about to enter Chernobyl. We've received reports of possible groundwater contamination, illegal septic discharge, and improper waste disposal. I can smell the setup from a mile away. The timing's too perfect, the complaint's too coordinated. But what really pisses me off is the news crew filming everything, making it look like my family's century-old homestead is some kind of toxic waste dump. Gentlemen, I say, keeping my voice level despite wanting to throw someone down the mountain, y'all are welcome to inspect whatever you need, but I'd appreciate knowing who filed these complaints. Earl shifts uncomfortably. Anonymous tips deck came through the state hotline. Mini twist. While they're setting up their equipment, I notice something that makes my blood boil. The news reporter is interviewing someone just out of camera range. I catch a glimpse of platinum blonde hair and designer hiking boots. Viv orchestrated this whole circus, complete with media coverage to publicly humiliate me and pressure me into selling. Time for some strategic counterintelligence. I walk over to where the reporter is finishing her interview with Viv, who's wearing a concerned citizen mask that would fool nobody who knew her. Excuse me, I interrupt politely. I'm Declan Forrester, the property owner. Since you're here covering this story, I'd like to share some information that might interest your viewers. The reporter, young, eager, probably thinks she's uncovered environmental corruption perks up immediately. Of course, Mr. Forrester. What would you like people to know? I pull out my phone and show her a screenshot from my trail cameras. Well, I'd like them to know that the person who just gave you that interview has been trespassing on my property for weeks, photographing my home illegally, and I have video evidence of her discussing filing false reports with county agencies. Viv's face goes white, then red, then somewhere approaching purple. This is harassment. Ma'am, the reporter says, suddenly very interested. Are you saying you have documented evidence of the complainant trespassing and discussing false reports? Before I can answer, Earl calls out from behind the cabin. Deck, you better come see this. The hazmat team has set up their testing equipment around my septic system. Rodriguez is holding some kind of electronic detector that should be beeping like crazy if there's contamination. Instead, it's silent as a church mouse. Mr. Forrester, Rodriguez says, pulling off his protective mask. I've never seen readings this clean. Your system isn't just compliant, it's exceeding environmental standards by a significant margin. Whoever reported contamination was either grossly misinformed or deliberately lying. Peterson, the building inspector, is equally confused. Sir, I've been doing this for 15 years. Your cabin's foundation is solid granite and steel construction that would meet today's earthquake standards. These reports claimed imminent structural collapse, but this building could probably survive a nuclear bomb. The taste of vindication is sweeter than my morning coffee, but I'm not done yet. Gentlemen, if you're interested in actual environmental violations, you might want to test the runoff from those new mansions down the valley. I've noticed some unusual discoloration in the creek after heavy rains. Knowledge nugget. Anonymous complaints to government agencies can be traced through Freedom of Information requests, and false reports to environmental agencies constitute federal crimes with serious penalties. Takeaway. When facing coordinated harassment through government agencies, document everything and remember that filing false reports is a crime that often carries heavier penalties than the violations they're claiming. While the inspection team packs up their equipment, the news reporter corners me for a longer interview. I give her copies of selected trail camera footage, explain the timeline of harassment, and suggest she might want to investigate the rapid approval process for the Pine Ridge development. This is quite a story, Mr. Forrester. Mind if we do a follow-up piece about HOA overreach and harassment? Ma'am, I'd be honored. But you might want to check your sources more carefully next time before showing up with hazmat teams. As the convoy of official vehicles drives away, I notice Viv standing by her Range Rover, frantically talking on her phone. The mountain wind carries fragments of her conversation words like damage control and legal options, and this wasn't supposed to happen. The environmental officer stops by my porch before leaving. Mr. Forrester, off the record, you might want to know that we've gotten similar false reports about properties in Texas and Florida over the past few years. Same pattern, anonymous tips, coordinated timing, always targeting people in disputes with certain HOA management companies. Interesting. Very interesting. That evening, I fire up my laptop and start doing some research on Vivian Ashworth's background. Turns out our HOA queen has left a trail of suspicious property disputes across 3 states, each one involving environmental complaints, harassment campaigns, and mysterious property acquisitions at below-market prices. The pieces of a much bigger puzzle are starting to fit together, and the picture they're forming is uglier than I imagined. But if Viv wants to play dirty, she just picked a fight with someone who spent decades working in an industry where cutting corners can kill you. She's about to learn what real due diligence looks like. The gloves are officially off. The next morning, I wake up to find my power's been cut off. Not storm damage, not a blown fuse. Someone had called the electric company claiming there were dangerous electrical violations that required immediate service disconnection for public safety. The smell of kerosene from my emergency lanterns brings back memories of childhood camping trips, except this isn't voluntary. I'm boiling coffee over a camp stove when my phone rings. The electric company's automated system informing me that service has been temporarily suspended pending safety inspection and HOA approval for reconnection. HOA approval for electricity on my own damn property. I'm still processing this level of bureaucratic insanity when a certified letter arrives, hand-delivered by some law firm courier who looks like he'd rather be serving papers to actual criminals. The envelope is thick as a novel, printed on letterhead so expensive you can feel the money. Ashworth, Sterling and Associates, Real Estate Law. Inside, 47 pages of legal jargon that basically boils down to pay us $250,000 in damages and compliance fees, or we'll sue you into the Stone Age. They're claiming my non-compliance has caused irreparable harm to community property values, and my hostile attitude constitutes intentional interference with business relations. The letter gives me 72 hours to respond. Not to pay to respond. The subtext is clear. Hire expensive lawyers or get steamrolled. But here's what makes this whole performance particularly insulting. The law firm's address is in downtown Denver, and according to their website, their senior partner is Rex Sterling. As in Rex Sterling, husband of Vivian Ashworth. These people aren't just corrupt, they're laughably obvious about it. Mini twist. While I'm reading through their legal threats, I notice something that makes me smile for the first time all morning. The lawsuit claims damages from January 1st of this year, but according to county records, I didn't even return to Colorado until March. They're claiming 6 months of property value damage from a guy who wasn't even in the state. Amateur hour. Time for my counter-research phase. I spend the day at the county library. Their internet is faster than my cabin's spotty connection, and I need to dig deep. What I find in public records makes my oil rig days look like kindergarten for complexity and corruption. Vivian Ashworth isn't just some suburban tyrant with a control problem. She's been running the same scam across multiple states for nearly a decade. The pattern is always identical. Buy land cheap through shell companies. Fast-track development permits through friendly local officials. Establish iron-fisted HOA with herself in permanent control. Systematically harass any existing residents who refuse to join or pay her inflated fees. Force them to sell below market value through legal intimidation and bureaucratic warfare. Resell at massive profit. Texas. 4 developments, 17 families forced out, currently under investigation for fraud. Florida, 2 developments, 9 families, 1 federal lawsuit pending. Arizona, 3 developments closed down by state attorney general for racketeering, and now Colorado gets to be her latest hunting ground. But here's where her research team screwed up. They never bothered checking the mineral rights history on my property. While they were focused on surface ownership and HOA covenants, they missed the fact that my great-grandfather was smarter than they gave him credit for. The original 1923 homestead patent didn't just grant surface rights. It included mineral rights, water rights, and something called perpetual access easement for mineral development. Legal language that basically means I have the right to access my mineral holdings even if someone else owns the surface. Every single one of those mansion foundations sits on top of my mineral rights. Knowledge nugget. Mineral rights are separate from surface rights and often trump HOA covenants, local zoning laws, and even some government regulations because they're protected by federal mining law dating back to the 1800s. Takeaway. When fighting property disputes, always research mineral rights, water rights, and easements. They often provide legal authority that supersedes modern restrictions. I'm still absorbing the implications when my phone buzzes with a text from Earl at the health department. Deck, thought you should know. Got a call from the state attorney general's office. Someone's been asking questions about environmental complaints in our county, specifically about patterns of false reporting. Interesting timing. That evening, I'm reading by kerosene light when I hear the unmistakable sound of someone trying to be quiet on gravel. My trail cameras have night vision, but I don't need electronic surveillance to know I've got visitors. 3 figures in dark clothing are creeping around my property with what looks like spray paint cans and a bag of supplies. The smell of gasoline hits my nose just as I realize what they're planning. These idiots are about to try to burn down a cabin built from fire-resistant cedar logs during Colorado's wet season on property that's been under electronic surveillance for weeks. I step onto the porch with a flashlight and my grandfather's old lever-action rifle, not pointing it at anyone, just making sure it's visible. "Evening, folks." Beautiful night for a walk, isn't it? The figures freeze like deer in headlights. In the flashlight beam, I can make out 2 men and a woman, all wearing ski masks like discount bank robbers. Now, I'm going to count to 10, and then I'm calling the sheriff. Y'all might want to consider whether whatever you're getting paid is worth felony arson charges. They drop their supplies and run like their asses are on fire, stumbling through the darkness toward what sounds like a vehicle parked on the main road. But they left behind a gasoline can, 3 spray paint cans, and a bag containing road flares and what looks like a timing device. Evidence that's about to make Vivian Ashworth's legal problems exponentially worse. I call Sheriff Martinez directly. We'd met during the false health complaints incident, and he seemed like a straight shooter who didn't appreciate having his department used for harassment campaigns. "Deck, what kind of trouble are you having now?" "Sheriff, I just scared off 3 people who were about to commit arson on my property. They left behind enough evidence to stock a fireworks stand. I'll be right up. Don't touch anything and keep that rifle handy until I get there." 20 minutes later, Martinez is photographing the abandoned arson supplies while I show him trail camera footage of the attempted break-in. "Son, you just gave me enough evidence to arrest someone for attempted arson, conspiracy, and probably RICO charges if we can prove who hired them." As he's loading the evidence into his patrol car, Martinez stops and looks at me seriously. "Deck, off the record? You might want to know that the FBI's been asking questions about property fraud schemes in Colorado. Seems like someone's been running a pattern of harassment and illegal property acquisition that's caught federal attention. The pieces of the puzzle are falling into place, and the picture they're forming is about to land several people in federal prison. But first, I've got a lawsuit to respond to. And after tonight, I think I've got some very interesting counterclaims to file. 3 days later, I'm sitting in the office of Roxanne Blackwood, a property rights attorney in Colorado Springs who specializes in cases the big firms won't touch. Her office smells like old law books and strong coffee, the kind of place where real work gets done, not billable hours get padded. "Mr. Forrester," she says, spreading out a stack of documents that looks like it could choke a horse, "you're not going to believe what my research team found." She slides over a thick folder labeled Forrester Mineral Rights, Historical Analysis. The first document is a photocopy of my great-grandfather's original 1923 homestead patent, stamped with federal seals and signed by officials whose names belong in history books. "Your great-grandfather didn't just homestead 320 acres, Roxanne says with a grin that suggests she's about to blow my mind. According to federal records, he filed claims on mineral rights covering 1,280 acres, the entire valley floor plus the surrounding ridgelines. I'm still processing this when she flips to the next document. Here's where it gets interesting. When your family sold off parcels in the 1970s and 80s, the deeds transferred surface rights only. The mineral rights stayed with the original homestead patent, which means..." She pauses dramatically. "You don't just own your cabin, Mr. Forrester. You own the mineral rights under every single mansion in Pine Ridge Estates." The room goes quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of traffic. I'm trying to wrap my head around the implications when Roxanne drops the next bombshell. But wait, there's more. Under federal mining law, mineral rights include reasonable surface access for extraction activities, which means you have legal authority to access your mineral holdings even if someone else owns the surface. She slides over another document, a geological survey from the 1980s that shows the valley sits on top of significant deposits of rare earth elements, the kind used in electronics and renewable energy technology. "Mr. Forrester, based on current market prices, your mineral holdings could be worth anywhere from $50 million to $200 million. I lean back in my chair, feeling like someone just hit me with a sledgehammer made of good news. "So let me get this straight," I say slowly. "Viv's been threatening to steal property that I not only own legally, but that sits on top of mineral rights worth more than her entire development?" "That's exactly right." And here's the best part. Every building permit issued for those mansions should have required notification of mineral rights holders. That's federal law. Roxanne pulls out another folder, this one labeled Pine Ridge Development, Permit Violations. None of the permits filed for Pine Ridge Estates included mineral rights notifications. None of them. Which means every single construction permit was issued illegally. The implications hit me like an avalanche. So their entire development is built on illegally issued permits? Gets better. I pulled the financial records for Pine Ridge Estates LLC, it's public information. Guess how much money has flowed through that organization in the past 2 years? I shake my head. $2.8 million in HOA fees and special assessments. But here's the interesting part. Only 800,000 shows up in legitimate HOA expenses. The remaining $2 million disappeared into shell companies owned by... She pauses for effect. Board members, family businesses. My jaw drops. She's been embezzling $2 million? That's just what we can trace. The real number is probably higher. Roxanne leans forward, her expression turning serious. Mr. Forrester, what you've got here isn't just an HOA dispute. This is organized fraud, racketeering, and potentially federal crimes involving mail fraud, wire fraud, and violation of federal mining laws. She hands me one final document, a letter with FBI letterhead. This morning, I contacted the federal task force that's been investigating property fraud schemes in the Mountain West region. Agent Patricia Reeves is very interested in talking to you. Seems like your situation fits a pattern they've been tracking across multiple states. I stare at the letter, trying to process everything. 6 months ago, I was just a guy trying to come home and heal from grief. Now I'm sitting on mineral rights worth hundreds of millions, evidence of federal crimes, and the key to bringing down what appears to be a multi-state criminal enterprise. Roxanne, what happens now? She smiles like a shark that's just spotted a school of fish. Now, Mr. Forrester, we turn the tables completely. You're not the defendant in this story anymore. You're the plaintiff with enough legal firepower to level their entire operation. The taste of justice is sweeter than I expected, but there's still work to do. First thing we do is file for an emergency injunction to stop all HOA activities pending investigation of their legal authority. Second, we demand a complete accounting of every dollar that's flowed through their organization. Third, we notify every homeowner in the development that their property titles may be invalid due to permit violations. She pauses, letting that sink in. And fourth, we let Agent Reeves know that you're ready to cooperate fully with the federal investigation. I walk out of that office feeling like a different man than the one who walked in. The mountain air tastes cleaner, the sun feels warmer, and for the first time in months, I'm not playing defense. Vivian Ashworth thinks she's been hunting a wounded deer. She's about to find out she's been stalking a grizzly bear with a law degree and federal backing. The real fight is just beginning. Walking out of Roxanne's office, I feel like Clark Kent stepping out of a phone booth, except instead of a cape, I'm wearing mineral rights worth more than most small countries' GDP. But having nuclear weapons and knowing how to use them strategically are two different things entirely. Roxanne's assembled what she calls a dream team, though it looks more like a support group for lawyers with justice complexes. There's Marcus Chen, an environmental attorney who usually defends spotted owls but got interested when he heard about illegal permit violations. Sarah Martinez, a financial crimes specialist who left the prosecutor's office because she was tired of plea deals with white-collar criminals. And Jake Morrison, a former FBI agent turned private investigator who specializes in multi-state fraud cases. First things first, Roxanne says over coffee that could strip paint. We need to document everything systematically. Jake's going to coordinate with Agent Reeves at FBI, while Sarah traces every dollar that's moved through Viv's shell companies. Jake pulls out a laptop and starts showing us a digital map that looks like something from a spy movie. We've identified similar operations in Texas, Florida, Arizona, and New Mexico. Same pattern every time shell company purchases, rapid permit approvals, HOA harassment campaigns, forced property sales. The red pins on his map look like a disease spreading across the Southwest. Total estimated fraud across all jurisdictions? Conservative estimate is $12 million over 8 years. But that's just what we can prove so far. Marcus opens his own laptop, and suddenly we're looking at satellite imagery of Pine Ridge Estates. Environmental violations are extensive. Illegal grading altered natural water flow patterns. Several homes were built in floodplains without proper permits, and there's evidence of contaminated construction runoff entering protected watersheds. Sarah spreads out financial documents that look like they came from an accountant's nightmare. Shell company structure is designed to hide asset ownership and facilitate money laundering. Vivian Ashworth's real estate holdings across 4 states are worth approximately $15 million, all purchased with funds that can't be traced to legitimate income sources. I'm absorbing all this when Roxanne drops the strategic bombshell. Here's our approach. We let the feds build their criminal case while we pursue civil remedies. Deck, your mineral rights give us the legal authority to challenge every permit, every building, every HOA action taken without proper notification. We can essentially freeze their entire operation while the criminal investigation proceeds. She pulls out a thick legal document. Emergency injunction against all HOA enforcement activities, pending resolution of mineral rights notification violations, filed this morning, hearing scheduled for next week. Marcus chimes in with his environmental angle. EPA has opened a formal investigation based on our complaint. If they find violations, and they will, it could result in federal cleanup orders and criminal charges for environmental crimes. Knowledge nugget. Federal mining law requires notification of mineral rights holders before any surface development, and violation of these requirements can void building permits and require complete environmental impact reassessments. Takeaway. Mineral rights often provide legal authority that trumps local zoning, HOA covenants, and even state regulations. Always research subsurface rights when fighting property disputes. But the piece to resistance comes from Jake, who's been quietly building what he calls the Community Intelligence Network. Deck, remember your neighbor Silas? Turns out he's not the only original resident who's been keeping detailed records of HOA harassment. We've got 4 homeowners with documentation going back 2 years, plus 3 newcomers who realized they were defrauded after buying properties with clouded titles. He slides over a thick binder labeled Witness Statements and Evidence. 17 people willing to testify about harassment, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy, plus your trail camera footage, financial records, and now federal agency backing. Sarah opens another folder that smells like fresh printer ink and righteous anger. Civil lawsuit filed this afternoon. RICO charges against Vivian Ashworth, Rex Sterling, and 12 co-conspirators across 4 states, seeking treble damages under racketeering statutes, which means... She pauses for dramatic effect. If we win, they're not just looking at criminal charges. They're looking at paying back 3 times every dollar they've stolen, plus attorney fees, plus punitive damages. Roxanne leans back in her chair with the satisfied expression of someone who's about to ruin some very deserving people's entire lives. Conservative estimate? We're talking about a $40 million judgment, complete asset forfeiture, and federal prison sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years. The room goes quiet except for the sound of justice grinding its gears. What about the innocent homeowners? I ask, because despite everything, I don't want regular families to lose their homes because they trusted the wrong people. Marcus has an answer for that too. Title insurance claims, plus a settlement fund created from seized assets. Every legitimate homeowner gets made whole, properties get proper environmental remediation, and the valley gets permanent conservation protections. Jake closes his laptop with a decisive snap. Timeline: emergency injunction hearing next week should freeze all HOA activities. FBI arrests probably happen within 30 days based on evidence quality. Civil trial starts in 6 months, but most defendants will settle once the criminal charges come down. I look around the room at these 4 people who've decided to help a mountain hermit take on organized crime, and I feel something I haven't experienced since my mom died. Hope mixed with the absolute certainty that justice is coming. So, I say, when do we start destroying these people's lives? Roxanne's smile could power a small city. Mr. Forrester, we already have. The taste of mountain air through the office windows carries the scent of pine trees and incoming victory. Somewhere in Denver, Vivian Ashworth is probably planning her next harassment campaign, completely unaware that her entire criminal enterprise is about to be dismantled by federal prosecutors and a guy whose family has been outsmarting bullies since 1923. This is going to be fun. 2 weeks later, I'm watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold when the sound of helicopters breaks the morning silence. Not the occasional medical transport or news chopper. These are federal birds, black and serious, circling the valley like mechanical vultures. By 8 a.m., Pine Ridge Estates looks like a federal crime scene. FBI vehicles, IRS criminal investigation vans, EPA enforcement trucks, and enough federal agents to invade a small country. The smell of rotor wash mixes with mountain pine as helicopters ferry in evidence recovery teams. My phone starts buzzing with texts from neighbors. "Holy shit, Deck, what did you do?" And "FBI just arrested Viv at her house." And "news vans everywhere. They're calling it the biggest HOA fraud case in Colorado history." But the sweetest message comes from Earl at the county health department. "Deck, Wade Thornberry just got perp walked out of the courthouse in federal handcuffs. Thought you'd want to know." Wade Thornberry, the county commissioner who fast-tracked all those illegal permits. Turns out Jake's investigation found a paper trail of bribes, kickbacks, and what the federal prosecutors are calling a conspiracy to defraud the United States government. Mini twist. While I'm watching the federal circus through binoculars, my trail cameras pick up something that makes me laugh out loud. Rex Sterling, Viv's lawyer husband, is trying to sneak files out of their mansion's back door to a waiting car. Problem is, the FBI has the place surrounded, and he's carrying boxes labeled confidential legal files in broad daylight, where every federal camera can record his obstruction of justice. Amateur hour continues. My phone rings, Roxanne calling from what sounds like a war room full of federal agents. "Deck, you're not going to believe this. The raid on Viv's house turned up evidence of fraud schemes in 6 states, not 4. We're talking about a criminal enterprise that's been operating for over a decade." "How bad?" Conservative estimate, 43 families defrauded, $18 million stolen, and enough RICO violations to keep federal prosecutors busy for the next 5 years. Through my binoculars, I watch federal agents carrying computer hard drives, boxes of financial records, and what looks like enough evidence to stock a small library. The sight is more satisfying than my morning coffee, which is saying something. But Viv's not going quietly. By afternoon, the local news is running her crisis management playbook interviews from concerned residents, talking about government overreach and vindictive neighbors. The story she's pushing is that I'm some kind of dangerous loner who manipulated federal agencies into harassing innocent community leaders. The irony is thick enough to choke on, but her media strategy has one fatal flaw. She doesn't know about the trail camera footage we haven't released yet. That evening, Jake calls with an update that makes my day complete. "Deck, remember those 3 people who tried to burn down your cabin? Well, one of them just got arrested trying to board a flight to Mexico with $50,000 in cash and a fake passport." Let me guess, he's talking? Like a parrot with a law degree. Turns out Viv hired them through her cousin's security company in Dallas, same crew that's been doing intimidation work for her other fraud operations across the Southwest. The pieces keep falling into place like dominoes in an earthquake. "Gets better," Jake continues. Guy's testimony puts Viv at the center of a conspiracy that includes arson for hire, witness intimidation, bribery of public officials, and what the feds are calling domestic terrorism for using government agencies as weapons against private citizens. That night, I'm reading by LED lantern, still no power, but now it's by choice rather than harassment, when Sheriff Martinez pulls into my driveway with his lights off. "Deck," he says quietly, "thought you should know. Federal marshals are setting up a security perimeter around the valley tonight. Agent Reeves thinks Viv might try something desperate before they can arrest her associates." Desperate how? The kind of desperate that makes people do stupid things with explosives. He hands me a radio and a federal contact card. "Direct line to FBI Tactical Command. If you see anything unusual, call immediately." As his patrol car disappears into the darkness, I realize that what started as a property dispute has become something much more dangerous. When people are facing life sentences, they sometimes decide they have nothing left to lose. The mountain air tastes different tonight, charged with tension and the metallic scent of approaching storm. My trail cameras have night vision. My grandfather's rifle is loaded, and somewhere in the valley below, federal agents are watching over a community that's about to learn how deep corruption can run in small places. But there's something else in the air tonight, the smell of justice finally catching up to people who thought they were too smart to get caught. I settle into my porch chair with the radio close at hand and my rifle across my knees. If Viv wants to add federal assault charges to her growing collection of felonies, she's welcome to try. The grizzly bear is awake, and he's done being hunted. Around midnight, my trail cameras detect movement on the Access Road 3 vehicles with their lights off, moving slowly toward the valley like they're planning something that requires darkness. Time to call in the cavalry. I key the radio and whisper, "FBI command, this is Forrester." I've got 3 vehicles approaching the valley with lights off, moving tactical. You might want to take a look. The response comes back immediately. "Copy, Forrester. Maintain position. Do not engage. Federal units moving to intercept." Through the darkness, I can hear the faint sound of helicopters spooling up somewhere in the distance. The final confrontation is about to begin, and this time, the good guys have federal backup. Vivian Ashworth picked the wrong mountain hermit to mess with. The helicopters never came. By dawn, the 3 mysterious vehicles had vanished like ghosts, leaving me wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. But Agent Reeves calls at 7 a.m. with news that explains the midnight theater. "Mr. Forrester, those vehicles you spotted were our federal surveillance teams repositioning for today's operation. Thanks for the heads up, though. Shows our perimeter security is working." Today's operation? Final phase arrests. We're picking up the last of Viv's associates, including some players from out of state who thought they could skip town before we connected the dots. By noon, the news is reporting federal arrests in Texas, Florida, and Arizona, all connected to what they're calling the Pine Ridge fraud conspiracy. 17 people in custody, with more arrests expected. The financial crimes alone are staggering. $23 million in stolen HOA fees, fraudulent property transactions, and what prosecutors describe as the largest organized HOA fraud scheme in U.S. history. But Vivian Ashworth is nowhere to be found. Mini twist. While federal agents are rounding up her network, Viv has apparently gone completely off the rails. According to Jake's sources, she's been calling in bomb threats to federal buildings, claiming she has explosive evidence that will bring down the whole conspiracy against her. The woman who spent months calling me unstable is now making terrorist threats against federal agents. Her desperation reaches peak insanity when she files a $100 million lawsuit against me, the FBI, the EPA, and unknown federal conspirators for what she calls malicious prosecution and destruction of her legitimate business enterprises. The lawsuit is 47 pages of paranoid rambling that reads like it was written by someone who's completely lost touch with reality. My favorite claim is that I'm secretly a federal agent provocateur who was planted in the valley to destroy her development through illegal surveillance and environmental terrorism. Rex Sterling, her lawyer husband, has apparently refused to represent her smart move since he's facing his own federal charges for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. Viv's been forced to represent herself, which explains why her legal filings read like the manifesto of someone who's watched too many conspiracy theory documentaries. Jake calls that afternoon with an update that's both hilarious and deeply concerning. "Deck, you need to hear this. Viv's been calling county officials claiming she has smoking gun evidence of a federal conspiracy to steal her property. She's demanding they arrest you for treason against the state of Colorado. Please tell me they're not taking her seriously. Are you kidding?" After federal agents arrested their commissioner for bribery, county officials are avoiding her calls like she's got the plague. But here's the concerning part. She's also been trying to hire private security firms to protect her constitutional rights and defend against federal tyranny. That evening, I'm splitting firewood when I notice something that makes my blood run cold. Fresh tire tracks in the mud near my property line tracks from heavy vehicles that came and went during the day while I was in town getting supplies. My trail cameras should have caught anything, but when I check the footage, there's a 2-hour gap where the cameras mysteriously malfunctioned. Professional jamming equipment, which means Viv's hired people who know what they're doing. I immediately call Agent Reeves. "Agent Reeves, I think I've had visitors today. Professional ones. My security system was jammed and there are tire tracks from heavy vehicles. Mr. Forrester, we've been monitoring communications that suggest Mrs. Ashworth has hired a private military contractor based in Arizona. Former Special Forces guys who specialize in asset protection and intelligence gathering for wealthy clients facing legal problems. Asset protection? Corporate speak for intimidation, surveillance, and sometimes worse. We're tracking them, but they're good at staying just inside legal boundaries. The next morning brings news that makes the situation even more surreal. Viv has apparently called a press conference to announce that she's filing for political asylum in Mexico, claiming persecution by what she calls the American Deep State Environmental Terrorism Complex. The woman is actually planning to flee the country rather than face federal charges. But her escape plan hits a snag when customs agents at Denver International Airport arrest her trying to board a private jet with 2 suitcases full of cash, gold coins, and bearer bonds worth approximately $3 million. The federal charges keep piling up: money laundering, tax evasion, attempting to flee prosecution, and unlawful export of monetary instruments. The justice system is making sure she won't see daylight again until she's collecting Social Security. Knowledge nugget. Federal prosecutors can file additional charges for attempting to flee prosecution, and moving large amounts of cash or valuables across international borders without proper declaration is a separate federal crime with mandatory minimum sentences. Takeaway. When facing federal charges, running makes everything worse. Prosecutors view flight as consciousness of guilt and will add years to any eventual sentence. That night, Jake calls with the final update on Viv's private military contractors. Good news, Deck. FBI raided their compound in Arizona this morning. Turns out they weren't just doing asset protection, they were running weapons to cartel groups in Mexico. Your harassment case just helped the feds bust an international arms trafficking ring. I'm still processing this when he delivers the best news of all. Viv's in federal custody without bond. Her lawyer husband is cooperating with prosecutors to avoid a 20-year sentence. The county commissioner is pleading guilty and agreeing to testify about the bribery scheme. And the private military guys are looking at federal weapons trafficking charges that carry life sentences. The taste of victory is sweeter than morning coffee, but there's still one more act to this drama. Jake, when's the trial? There won't be one. Viv's attorney, her new court-appointed attorney, since she can't afford private counsel anymore, is negotiating a plea deal. Prosecutors are offering 15 years federal prison in exchange for full cooperation and asset forfeiture. 15 years? Dick, she's 64 years old and facing charges that could put her away for life. 15 years is essentially a life sentence, and she knows it. As I hang up the phone and look out at the valley that's finally peaceful again, I realize that justice isn't always swift, but sometimes it's absolutely perfect. The Queen of Pine Ridge Estates is about to become inmate number something or other at a federal correctional facility. Her criminal empire has been dismantled, her assets seized, and her co-conspirators are lining up to testify against each other. But the real victory isn't Viv's downfall, it's what comes next. The healing, the community rebuilding, and the chance to turn this whole nightmare into something positive. The final confrontation is about to begin, but this time it won't be about conflict. It'll be about justice, restoration, and proving that sometimes the good guys really do win. The federal courthouse in Denver looks like a fortress on sentencing day, surrounded by news vans, FBI vehicles, and what seems like half the population of Pine Ridge Valley. The marble steps echo with the sound of camera crews setting up equipment and reporters practicing their opening lines for what CNN is calling the HOA fraud trial of the century. I'm wearing my only good suit, the one I bought for my mother's funeral, and feeling like a fish out of water among all the federal agents and media professionals. But Roxanne insisted I be here for what she calls the final moment of justice. Inside the courtroom, the air smells like old wood and nervous sweat. Federal Judge Patricia Williams presides from her bench with the kind of authority that makes grown men confess their sins just by looking at her. The gallery is packed with victims from 4 states, federal agents, and enough reporters to start their own small country. Vivian Ashworth sits at the defendant's table looking like a different person entirely. Gone is the perfectly coiffed HOA queen with designer clothes and predatory smile. In her place sits a broken woman in an orange jumpsuit, her platinum blonde hair showing gray roots and her face bearing the hollow look of someone who's finally realized the game is over. Her court-appointed attorney, a tired-looking public defender who drew the short straw, stands to address the judge. Your Honor, my client accepts full responsibility for her actions and respectfully requests the court's mercy in sentencing. Judge Williams doesn't look impressed. She spent the morning reviewing victim impact statements from 43 families across 6 states, detailing how Viv's schemes destroyed their lives, stole their savings, and turned their communities into war zones. Mrs. Ashworth, the judge says, her voice carrying the weight of federal authority, you stand convicted of operating a criminal enterprise that defrauded families of over $23 million. You used homeowner associations as weapons to terrorize your neighbors, corrupted public officials, and when faced with justice, you hired criminals to intimidate witnesses and destroy evidence. Viv starts to speak, but Judge Williams cuts her off with a look that could freeze helium. You turned the American dream of homeownership into a nightmare of harassment and theft. You preyed upon elderly residents who trusted community leaders, and you corrupted the very institutions meant to protect property rights. The courtroom is silent, except for the hum of ventilation and the scratch of reporters' pens. Even the federal agents seem to be holding their breath. Agent Reeves leans over and whispers, "This is where it gets interesting." Judge Williams opens a thick folder and begins reading from what must be Viv's pre-sentencing report. The court notes that defendant showed no remorse during her crime spree, no mercy to her victims, and no respect for the law even after her arrest. The defendant's attempt to flee prosecution, her efforts to destroy evidence, and her hiring of criminal associates to intimidate witnesses demonstrate a complete lack of rehabilitation potential. She pauses, letting that sink in throughout the courtroom. Mrs. Ashworth, this court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison without possibility of parole, followed by 10 years of supervised probation. You will pay restitution in the amount of $69 million, representing treble damages under federal racketeering statutes. The number hits the courtroom like a physical blow. $69 million. Viv's face goes white, then gray, then she slumps in her chair like someone cut her puppet strings. But Judge Williams isn't finished. Additionally, all assets connected to your criminal enterprise are hereby forfeited to the United States government for victim compensation. This includes all real estate holdings, bank accounts, investment accounts, jewelry, vehicles, and any other assets acquired through proceeds of your criminal activity. Viv finally finds her voice, and what comes out is pure, unfiltered desperation. Your Honor, this is persecution. I was protecting property values. I was trying to build a community. That mountain man destroyed everything with his lies and his federal conspirators. Even her own attorney looks embarrassed as she continues her delusional rant. I demand a retrial. I demand an investigation into federal overreach. I demand... Mrs. Ashworth, Judge Williams interrupts with ice-cold authority. You demanded many things over the past 3 years. You demanded that your neighbors surrender their property rights. You demanded that elderly residents pay illegal fees. You demanded that government officials ignore the law to serve your interests. The judge leans forward slightly, and the courtroom temperature seems to drop 10 degrees. Today, I demand justice for your victims. Bailiff, please remove the defendant. As federal marshals escort Viv from the courtroom, she turns back toward the gallery with wild eyes, scanning the crowd until she finds me sitting in the third row. This isn't over, Forrester, she screams, her voice cracking with desperation. You think you won, but you've destroyed everything. You've ruined families. Her voice cuts off as the courtroom doors close behind her, leaving only the echo of her breakdown and the sound of camera shutters capturing the final moment of the Pine Ridge fraud queen's reign of terror. Agent Reeves stands and addresses the room full of victims, reporters, and federal officials. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the largest HOA fraud prosecution in United States history. Thanks to the courage of witnesses and the cooperation of victims across multiple states, we've dismantled a criminal enterprise and recovered assets for full victim compensation. As we file out of the courthouse, Roxanne puts her hand on my shoulder. Deck, how does it feel to bring down a criminal empire? I look up at the Colorado sky, breathe in air that smells like freedom and justice, and give her the only answer that matters. Feels like I can finally go home. The taste of victory is sweet, but the real satisfaction isn't Viv's downfall. It's knowing that 43 families are getting their money back, corrupt officials are behind bars, and no other community will have to endure what Pine Ridge Valley went through. Justice served, mountain style. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my cabin porch with real electricity, hot coffee, and the satisfaction of watching the valley heal itself. The morning air carries the scent of wildflowers returning to meadows, where Viv's manicured lawns used to assault the landscape. Nature has a way of reclaiming what belongs to it, given enough time and the absence of HOA landscaping Nazis. the federal asset forfeiture turned into the largest victim compensation fund in Colorado history. Every family that got defrauded received full restitution plus damages. Elderly residents who lost their life savings got their money back with interest. Young families who nearly lost their homes are now debt-free, and the community that was torn apart by Viv's divide-and-conquer tactics has rebuilt itself stronger than ever. Silas Huckabee, my 73-year-old neighbor who first warned me about Viv's intimidation tactics, stops by every morning now for coffee and what he calls victory breakfast. Today, he's grinning like someone half his age. Deck, you see the news this morning? That County Commissioner Wade Thornberry got sentenced to 8 years federal prison. Judge said he violated the public trust and turned government into a criminal enterprise. The taste of justice keeps getting sweeter. The Pine Ridge development itself has been transformed from Viv's environmental crime scene into a model sustainable community. The EPA's cleanup removed contaminated soil, restored natural water flow patterns, and established conservation easements that will protect the watershed forever. The 8 mansions that violated every environmental law on the books have been renovated with solar panels, geothermal heating, and landscaping that works with nature instead of fighting it. Most importantly, the new community operates as a voluntary homeowners association with rotating leadership, transparent finances, and bylaws that would make constitutional lawyers weep with joy. No mandatory fees, no architectural Nazis, no power-hungry dictators masquerading as community leaders. The real victory came 3 months ago when we established the Pine Ridge Community Foundation using a portion of the forfeited assets. The foundation provides college scholarships for local kids pursuing environmental careers, funds habitat restoration projects throughout the valley, and operates what we're calling the Mountain Veterans Retreat Program. That last one is my personal favorite. Every month, combat veterans dealing with PTSD, depression, or just the challenge of returning to civilian life can spend a week at the cabin learning practical skills like sustainable living, wilderness survival, and what my grandfather would have called the art of being usefully self-reliant. No group therapy, no corporate wellness bullshit, just honest work, mountain air, and the kind of peace that comes from chopping your own firewood and catching your own dinner. The program is funded entirely by Viv's forfeited assets, which means her criminal enterprise is now paying for veterans to heal in the place she tried to destroy. Poetic justice doesn't get much more perfect than that. Roxanne stops by this afternoon with news that makes the whole saga feel complete. Deck, remember those other HOA fraud schemes we uncovered during the investigation? Federal prosecutors just announced indictments in Texas, Florida, and Arizona. Apparently your case opened the floodgates. Victims who were too scared to speak up before are now coming forward with evidence. She hands me a newspaper with a headline that makes me smile. Colorado mountain mans stand against HOA tyranny sparks nationwide reform movement. You've become something of a folk hero, she says. Property rights organizations are calling you the patron saint of homeowners fighting HOA abuse. The article mentions legislation being introduced in 12 states to strengthen homeowner protections against HOA overreach. Federal lawmakers are considering the Forester Act, which would require mineral rights notification for all development projects and establish federal oversight of HOA financial practices. My 15 minutes of fame feels pretty good, but the real satisfaction is simpler than headlines and legislation. Tonight, the valley is quiet except for natural sounds, creek water running over rocks, wind through pine trees, the distant call of an owl hunting in moonlight. No generators humming to power harassment campaigns, no expensive vehicles crunching up gravel roads to deliver legal threats, no clipboard-carrying suburbanites photographing century-old cabins like they're environmental disasters. Just peace. Jake calls as I'm watching sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Deck, thought you'd want to know Rex Sterling, Viv's lawyer husband, just got sentenced to 12 years federal prison. Judge said using legal credentials to facilitate organized crime was a special kind of betrayal that deserved enhanced punishment. The last domino falls. But here's the best part, Jake continues. Prison officials assigned Viv to work detail in the laundry facility. After 25 years of ordering other people around, she's spending her days washing other inmates' clothes. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor that makes everything worthwhile. As I'm settling in for the evening, my phone buzzes with a message that stops me cold. It's from a combat veteran in Montana, someone I've never met, asking for advice about an HOA that's trying to force him off land his family has owned for generations. The pattern sounds familiar: harassment campaigns, frivolous fines, coordinated legal threats designed to break someone who just wants to be left alone. I pour myself another cup of coffee, fire up the laptop, and start typing a response. Because if there's one thing I learned from this whole experience, it's that bullies only win when good people stay isolated and afraid. The Pine Ridge Valley is healing, justice has been served, and Vivian Ashworth is spending the rest of her natural life as a federal inmate. But the fight for property rights and community decency is bigger than one corrupt HOA queen and her criminal enterprise. Time to help the next mountain man stand his ground. Share your own HOA nightmare stories in the comments below. Let's make sure other communities don't have to go through what Pine Ridge Valley endured. And hit that subscribe button if you want more David versus Goliath justice stories that prove sometimes the little guy really can win. Remember, document everything, know your rights, and never let suburban dictators turn your community into their personal kingdom. The law is on your side, even when it doesn't feel that way. Justice, mountain style. Case closed.